You're listening to the Lady Audio Radio Show. Lady Audio. Lady Audio. Lady Audio. Lady Audio. Vintage High Sounds.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Lady Audio podcast. Our guest this week is Brynner Agassi. Brynner is a drummer and producer, and he also has a new podcast called The Mixing Board. Brynner, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Clara. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm doing all right today. I'm a little rushed because we were taking some pictures earlier. We set up the studio at like a photo studio, and we were taking a bunch of pictures for a new project that we're doing. So that's always stressful being under the lights like that.
I bet.
Yeah.
That's great.
So for my first question, I want to ask you about drums, obviously, because you're a drummer. And
Sure.
I wanted to ask you, what are your favorite drums for recording?
Oh, gosh. That's a good question. I'll be honest with you. My favorite drums for recording, I have two, so I can't say one without the other. But one would be the DW drum sets, and the second one would be the Yamaha Recording Customs. I absolutely love both drum kits. I would have to say, if I had to pick between the two and the one that I've had most experience with, I guess, I would say DW, just because the tonality and the characteristics that really are projected from the drums, they make the lives of the sound engineers a lot easier. I'm telling you this right now.
Okay.
The mixing, the processing, it's a lot easier with DW drum sets. I can't exactly tell you why. I wish we could talk to John Good about this, but the way they make those drum kits, they have such a beautiful characteristic of low tones that it's so easy to mix in with the music. And I got to tell you, they just sound amazing, whether it's being live or recording in the studio. DWs just really work out well.
That was going to be my next question, is if your favorite drums would differ from playing live shows.
You know, it's funny because they kind of do. I would say DW Yamaha would be great for studio and live. But I would say the Yamaha drum kits that I use and I use them specifically for live shows. And I love these kits because exactly like, I was telling you about the DWs in the studio, man, these Yamahas do such an amazing job of cutting through the loudest music you can find. And they just do such a great job. And I was first introduced to Yamaha way back when I was a little kid watching Dave Weckl. And I saw him using the Yamaha kits. And I was like, okay, Dave Weckl is one of my favorite drummers. If he's using Yamaha, then I know it's good. I'm going to go out there and get one.
Yeah.
And, of course, the same drum kit he was using was a lot of money, let's just say. So I always knew any line of Yamaha would work. So I started off with one of their introductory line drum kits and, just started purchasing more and more from there. And I got to tell you, they've worked well. And I've seen rock guys use it, like Jimmy Chamberlain of Smashing Pumpkins. I've seen Shannon Larkin use it with Godsmack. And Sully Erna, their lead singer, uses Yamaha as well. And they're just beautiful. The tonalities, the characteristics they give. It's a beautiful shell construction. And just the way they sound and project, they're amazing. But nothing against DW for live situations as well. It's just that low tone that you get from the DW. Sometimes, you want more of those mids and highs in your drums, and you get that with Yamaha in live situations. So
are you mainly a studio musician, or how many live shows do you do? It sounds like you've done quite a bit.
I've done quite a bit. I haven't done any live shows in a while. God, I started doing live shows with my father because my father's a singer, and my first live show I ever did was maybe when I was like 4 years old. He called me up on stage, or not 4 years old, I'm sorry, in the fourth grade. He called me up on stage and he said, I want my son to come play a song for me. And I went up there, and the audience obviously loved it because you have this like 8-year-old kid up on stage playing drums.
Aw.
But I started, yeah, I started playing full time live gigs with my dad. I started off with my father, and I was about 16 years old, and I started doing shows with him only when he would tour the California area. And from there, I just started doing, other live shows with other artists. And my main, I would say, the bulk of the live shows were when I moved out to Southern California in 2006. And, I got to tell you, I played the Roxy, I did, which the Roxy in itself was great because, I'm standing on stage where, guys like the Doors, Led Zeppelin, and other, Guns N' Roses were standing at one time. And it's like, man, I can't believe I'm standing right here and performing. So that was quite a treat. But I got to tell you, Clara, I fell in love with producing, and I really stopped focusing on doing live shows. I'll still do live shows here and there, but my main focus is producing now.
Okay, cool. When did you start recording your own music and being a producer? Did you start with your own music, or did you start with other artists? How did your recording career get started?
Oh, wow. Ever since I was a little kid going into the studio with my father, I was always like exposed to, I always saw the mixing boards and all the keyboards and all this stuff. And I was always fascinated with the creation of music. Now, obviously, when you're a little kid, you don't really realize all that's involved. You just, you look at the vocalist and he's singing, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. You just turn this knob for volume and this does this. And like, okay, that looks pretty easy. And as I got older, just being a drummer, getting older, I found the only way to really expand my mind musically was to learn other instruments. So I started playing a little bit of keyboard. I did attempt to play guitar, and I was not good at it. I'll tell you this. I was not good at it. I'm no guitarist. My fingers just don't work. I don't know what to tell you. But, I tried doing that. And I always stuck to, the keyboards, a little bit of piano, drums. But then I started listening to even more music. So I felt that the more mature I was getting musically and learning all these different aspects of music and all these different genres and being exposed to them, I felt that my drumming was becoming more mature. And what I mean by that is I wasn't, becoming a show off anymore. I didn't want to just put in like, double bass fills and all this stuff every chance I got. I wanted to play music for the music. And when I did move out to Southern California, everyone I was jamming with, I felt like I was almost dictating the way the music was going because they would rely on me for, so what do you think of this riff? Where do you think it should go from here? And you don't really get that from drummers. It's mainly the lead singer and the guitarist will always kind of dictate where the music's going. So I felt like, okay, you know what? It's a pleasure, and I'm humbled the fact that these musicians are asking me my opinion on things. So I felt that I had it in me to start creating music, not just drum parts.
Mhm.
So it was probably around, I want to say about 2000, the end of 2006, the beginning of 2007. I was involved with a band, a nameless band, really, because we could never figure out what the band name was going to be. We were just making really, great music, but we just could never figure out what the name of the band would be. And all throughout that, we all worked together. There was no egos. There was no nothing. We all worked together to make really good music. But the vocalist and the guitar player ended up leaving the band. And the bass player, Eric Brashear, and myself were the ones remaining. So, we have this studio to ourselves, and we're thinking, okay, let's just make music. And it was right then, I would say in 2007, that I said to myself, wow, I'm sitting here behind a mixing board. I have a keyboard. I have all these plugins. I'm actually making music. I'm not just a drummer anymore. And then when I did put myself out there as a drummer slash producer, I started seeing that, there was a shift in the calls I was getting and the emails that I was getting. People were now looking at me more of a producer first, then a drummer, because the industry's changed so much, as you know yourself, just during in the past 10, 15 years, that production producers, music producers, are so much prevalent now than they ever were. One time I was getting so many calls as a drummer to come do studio sessions, but then now it's like all production. And so I started seeing the tide kind of shift. And I just started seeing myself from '07 all the way now, just doing, more and more production, still drumming, of course, because I love drumming. And, I still post up videos on my Instagram and Twitter. And but it's more and more production, really. So I'd say for probably about the last 10, 11 years, I've been producing.
That's cool. That's cool. What's one of the most frustrating times that you've had in the studio?
Thinking that I could do something and you go in and you really can't. And I'll explain to you this. I don't know if you've ever been faced with this situation, but there was a time where I was getting called for a studio session and I listened to the song and I was like, oh, I don't need to practice this. I got it. It was simple. It's really simple. It's a 4/4. I could smash it. I'm just going to go in the studio. I'll rock it. Man, it's nothing. Well, I walk into the studio and the same song that, I thought to myself, oh man, I'm going to be great on this. You start playing it and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, can you turn up the click? And they're like, yeah. Listen to the click and you're playing and then you're falling behind and it's like, hey guys, can I take a 5-minute break here? And they're like, sure. And then you come back and you're like, can you turn up the click even more? And then it just doesn't fit. And that's happened to me once. And I was embarrassed because I was getting called in to do the song and you're just kind of left like, what's going on here, man? And so it was an embarrassing moment for me, but it just goes to show you that always be prepared and be ready and practice. For me, I thought it was going to be one of those songs where I could just walk in and play it. And it's different when you sit behind the drum set, when you put your headphones on, when you're really faced with the song. It's a different mindset. And I will say this. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I started producing because I started hearing the music in a whole different light than it was when I was just labeling myself, hey, I'm a drummer, I'll come in and play it, no problem. Because I see that a lot with drummers or just session musicians. They'll come play the part, they'll leave. Sometimes there's really no emotion and no mapping of the song there. So I think the more I got deeper into producing, the really shifted my attention span and just the way my mind worked when I was drumming. So yeah, that, my dear, was one of the times, and I'll never let it live down for myself. So it was quite an experience.
Yeah, I bet. So how much do you practice?
Not enough. I'm serious, not enough. I don't practice enough. I wish I was in a situation where I could practice like 2 or 3 hours a day because I don't get tired. Playing drums, I don't get tired. Obviously, if I'm playing 10 hours, I would, but yeah, seriously, I don't get tired. So for me, I practice now. I probably practice, if I can, up to half hour, a few times a week. And I'm just sitting there with my practice pad and my drumsticks in my hand. And I'm just practicing rudiments or just fills, but with a metronome. I always practice with a metronome. And I think that's really important. So yeah, not as much as I'd like, to be honest with you.
What kind of a metronome do you use?
I use the Tama rhythm watch. Yeah, I use that. It's great.
Cool. Yeah, because I know for drummers it can be kind of difficult to hear the click when you have, all the drums and you're trying to play to the click. So
Yes. And thank you for saying that. Finally, someone speaks up, in defense of drummers. Thank you, Claire. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. My next question is, what's one of the most fabulous times you've had in the studio?
Oh, man.
It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be the most, but it just has to be one of the most fabulous times.
Okay. Okay, I got it. It was when my music partner Mike and I were recording a song by the name of Hope Is Not Lost. And this song, I got to tell you, we spent probably about 2 or 3 months on. It's only a 2-minute song. So if you listen to it, you're like, oh, okay. I mean, really, it took you guys 2 or 3 months. We were sitting in the studio, just playing the parts, going back, re-recording. It got to a point where we started around 8 p.m. or so, and we found ourselves jamming to a loop, I'm not kidding you, for about 3.5 hours.
Whoa.
And by the time we were done, it's about 11:30. We looked at one another and we're like, do you realize we just jammed on this loop that went on for about 15 seconds? And I was playing the drums, he's playing guitar. We just lost ourselves. We just lost ourselves in the music. It was such a euphoric, it was such an amazing feeling that you can take this song and you could pick a portion of the song, maybe like 2 or 4 measures, and you just put it on a loop and you're thinking to yourself, what can we do for the next section, the next part? We have in our songs, we do like part 1, part 2, part 3, since they're 2-minute songs. And we're like, what can we do to go into part 3? So he's like, let's just jam on it and see what we think. So, okay, cool. We just took like about 2 or 4 measures, we looped them, and I sat behind the kit and he's behind his guitar. And we just started playing and coming up with ideas. And by the time we knew it, we're like, whoa. Well, it's now 11 o'clock. We have had a lot of fun doing this. Now, where do we go? And I'm telling you, it's just one of those experiences that was absolutely amazing and thrilling. And it just felt so good. So that was my most fascinating time in the studio. Upon others, though.
Yeah, I'm sure. Because we all have so many different stories to tell about being in the studio and things that went wrong and things that went right. But
yeah,
I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned your partner. I was going to ask you about the podcast first, but I want to save that for later. Sure. Now, I wanted to ask you about Displaced Music and your partner, and what's the story behind Displaced Music and what is it?
Oh, okay. Well, so how much time do we have for this podcast, Clara?
Take as long as you like.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Okay, so here's the story of Displaced Music. Mike Mansour, who is my partner in Displaced Music and is also one of my very best friends, we met each other through different types of arenas of playing and jamming. We actually auditioned for a band together once, and we didn't even know who each other were. So I got a call from the good old Craigslist. If you remember back in the day, everyone was using Craigslist to find one another on there for music purposes, of course.
Yes.
So I got a call from a guy who had a band in mind, and he was going to do an industrial band, and I love Nine Inch Nails and industrial music. So I was like, okay, cool. Hey, you know what? I'd like to try out for this. And he's like, hey, I checked out your videos. I want you to be in this band. I want you to try out for it. I have no other drummers, and the fact that you're also a producer, that's going to be great. Awesome. So I never met him. I just spoke to him over the phone, and he said, hey, you know what? I also found a guitar player. Now he's saying this. He's saying, I found a guitar player. I'm like, oh, awesome. And he's given me his phone number, which that guitar player is Mike. He's like, here, talk to this guy. His name is Mike. I was like, okay, what do you want me to tell him? He's like, well, just tell him that, you're also auditioning for this band and what time you want to meet. So I'm like, okay. So I get on the phone with Mike and I'm like, hey man, my name's Brynner. And he's like, okay. I'm like, well, I was told to call you and set up a time to meet. He's like, oh, okay. All right. Well, what time works? So we discussed that. And I tell you, it was awkward because I'm not the guy looking for anyone. This other guy, the singer who was named Nathan, he's the one looking for it. But here I am kind of, calling Mike and saying, let's set up a meeting. So it was really awkward for me in the whole situation. So we set up a meeting. We all go out and jam, and we discussed the song that we were going to jam, which was going to be War Pigs. And
Oh, that's the give me a Killing Joke? No.
no. War Pigs from Black Sabbath.
Oh, okay, Black Sabbath. Okay.
Yeah. And
I was thinking War Dance. That's right. Okay,
oh no, not War Dance. No, although that's a great song.
Yeah.
So we did War Pigs, and I got to tell you, it was one of those situations where we're all in the studio, and this goes back to one of your questions that you asked earlier of what was one of those times where it just doesn't, most fascinating times in the studio. This was one of them because
Okay.
I myself was kind of in this own world. I had just gotten off doing my album, The Sovereignty, and it's 2008. I'm now seeing myself back looking for musicians to jam. I'm not doing my own solo project because I just wrapped it up. The singer is off in his own world. The guitar player, Mike, he's kind of doing his own thing. We're all playing the same song, but we're not on the same page. So we just kind of sat back and looked at one another, and we're like, okay, this isn't going to work out. Sorry to waste everyone's time. I'm just not feeling it. And we all kind of parted ways. But I remember going outside and we were putting our equipment in the car. I went up to Mike because one thing about me, Clara, is I'm a very passionate individual. I love just anything I do it with passion. And when I love something so much, I speak about it in so much passion. And I love seeing passion in others. And when I saw Mike play guitar, there was so much passion in his playing. Now, the timing, the feel may not have been there, and none of us were on the same page. So it's not just Mike, it was all of us. We just weren't connecting, but nonetheless, there was so much passion in him that I couldn't just let it go. So I remember walking up to him, shaking his hand, and giving him a hug. And I gave him a hug, and I said, listen, brother, I want you to know you and I are going to keep in touch, and you and I will work together on something. And I just remember he looked at me and he just said, thanks, man. And I got to tell you, from 2008, we kept in touch with one another throughout the years. We jammed, we recorded music for other artists together. All in the time Mike was doing things with other artists. He was doing session work and live shows, and I was doing the same thing, but we just constantly kept in touch with one another. And the beauty of it is, we didn't just hang out and talk music. It was, hey, what are you doing, man? You doing good? Okay, you want to grab some lunch? Sure, let's go grab some lunch. And we would talk about our personal lives. So we really became friends rather than just, musicians who just jammed together. We became friends first, and then the music came. And that, I think, was something very beautiful of our friendship that kept it solid. Because from 2008, we really didn't work on Displaced music till about 2015. So you can tell there was a lot of years there just talking and meshing with one another and just coming up with different ideas. So going back to your question of how Displaced music came along, it was probably around 2013 or so that, I remember talking to Mike and I said, listen, man, I don't see myself doing live shows. I don't want to go on tour. I just, I've had offers for it. I say no because I don't want that lifestyle. I'm kind of over it. So I just kind of want to lay low and I want to just make music. Now, do I want to make music for artists? Sure, it's cool. But I really want to make music for like film and video games and TV. And Mike said, man, that's kind of the same avenue I want to go. And I was like, okay. All right, so why don't we talk about this some more? So Mike and I, we just got together and we said, look, why don't we start something and let's come up with music? I had already started doing some things in TV. I had just done some commercial for a car dealership, or it was like a car commercial in Europe, in Sweden. And I remember telling Mike, I said, look, this is kind of the rules of the game. We should make 2-minute songs and, minute and a half to 2-minute songs. I have my own studio. Let's just do it. So we kind of came up with the ideas. We talked about it, and we called it Displaced Music. And Displaced Music is just Mike and I. We have a music library. We are now welcoming other artists who want to put their songs as writers into our publishing library, where we can then go and find placements for them. And Displaced Music is Mike and I. We also make the music. So if you go to displacedmusic.com, those initial, I think we only have about 6 songs on there or so to showcase, but you'll find all the songs there and you can listen to them. And we've made them specifically to evoke emotion in the eyes and ears of the person watching a film or TV show or playing a video game. So if you listen to a lot of those songs, you'll quickly tell, like, oh, okay, this belongs in a video game, or oh, okay, this belongs in like a war and like a Terminator-esque type of film. So that's how Displaced Music came along. And I got to tell you, it's been one of the most satisfying things I've done in music ever. So it's a really great thing.
Cool. Yeah, and I was listening to some of the songs, and the song Momentum of the Machines uses a delay, I believe it is, on the kick or something. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that because it sounds like you maybe panned the delay off to the left. And I wanted to ask you the details about how you recorded that.
Momentum of the Machine. Oh man, I wish Mike was here, because we went back and forth on that thing so much. And I remember trying to come up with an idea, because he had a riff. And funny enough, that riff that you hear, that was created way back when we were jamming, like in 2012, 2013. And I remember we had saved it, and we said, okay, we're going to save this song. Don't use it for anything. You're going to save this, man, when we hook up and we do Displaced Music, and we're going to put this in the library. And so when we heard it, we automatically thought of Rammstein. And we heard in our own heads, we just connected, and we're like, man, we hear like a very industrial electronic sound. No live instrumentation, no nothing. Let's just keep it the way we feel. And so we went forward with that. And we both said, what movie do you see in your head? And we said Transformers, Zombies, Terminator, Total Recall. All these films just started coming out. And we're like, okay, so if that's what we're thinking, let's move forward with this. So Mike played his guitar riff and mapped out the song first on just to like a demo track of the drums. The drums were pretty much the same, but the drums were just played with an acoustic kit just as a demo, just to give us some sort of reference as far as map goes, where we're going to go with the music. So when I went in there to start programming some of the drums, I was using a lot of samples with the kicks. And you're right, there's a lot of delays on the snares, on the kicks, on the toms, because the song is so incredibly wild. I mean, in our head, the vision we had was like mayhem, machines, lasers, And I want to make that scene go onto the musically onto the song. So I said, what's the best way? I don't want to cram too many sounds in here, but what I can do is start delaying things. So I could start, delaying the kick when it goes boop 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 boop. And then I could start bringing the snare. I can bring in hi-hats. I can bring in toms, which is standard. Now, if you take the delay out, it sounds pretty mundane. It's very vanilla. But once you put in those delays in there, now you're hearing what we're seeing in our heads of chaos, machinery, and then you start adding some processing to it, some distortion, and different layers of snares and cymbals. And especially with that song, in the middle portion of the song where it picks up, the tempo stays the same, but the beat changes. It's like a 2/4. That snare that you hear, I actually was hitting a china and a crash at the same time, and I layered them right on bottom of the snare to give it a very swoosh type of sound when you hear the snare. So if you go back and listen to that song, in the middle portion where the beat picks up and it turns into a 2/4, you'll hear the snare, but you're going to hear just a deeper attack, and that's actually chinas and crashes right on top of the snare. Just as I hit it, I'm also hitting crashes and chinas on different tracks, and I'm just kind of mixing it in there. So you got a good ear. You definitely picked up on the delays, and I definitely used a lot of those.
Yeah, because when for drums, especially for me anyway, when you pan those delays to either the left or the right, they have more impact. And I just thought that was a really nice touch, and that's why I wanted to ask you about it.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah.
So there are a couple of other tunes that have some great piano playing that I heard, and I wanted to know, who is the piano player?
You're speaking to him.
Oh, okay. So you were the one that played on Hope Is Not Lost?
I am, yeah.
Okay. What kind of piano did you use?
That is a good question. I know that piano is actually a virtual instrument, so it's definitely a soft synth. It's definitely a plug-in. I don't remember off the top of my head which one it is, though. I can definitely get back to you on that.
Okay. For an older recording, when was Look Back, Walk Forward recorded? Because the piano on that's really nice too.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I'll tell you the piano on that. Actually the piano on that is the grand piano by Korg in their Triton Extreme. That's actually from the Korg Triton Extreme keyboard. and I used their grand piano, and that song is a whirlwind of emotions for me. Yeah, I recorded that song for my album, the solo album that I did under the name Sovereignty, The Sovereignty. And yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. So when did you start playing piano?
You know, believe me, as much as a compliment that is, I would never call myself a piano player because I can play. And look, I can play. But if you put me next to someone who really knows how to play piano, I will put my head down. I will walk with my tail between my legs. I started playing, I don't even want to say piano. I just started tinkering around with the keyboards, when I was young. I started identifying notes and tones in my head. When I would hear a song, I was like, oh, so I'd go around, it's not A, B, C. Oh, okay, it's the D note. Okay, oh, okay, this makes sense. So I'd start learning scales just by myself. I was very young. I was probably about 8, 9, 10 years old when I first started playing just keyboards. And as you get older, as you start producing more, you start understanding the feel of a pianist. You start knowing the feel because you can't play a piano as you would, let's say, a lead synth or anything, you don't play it. So you have to have that touch and everything. So for myself, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think I can mimic very simple piano patterns and piano parts. But listen, if you ask me to do something really difficult, I can't do it, I swear.
Yeah, I'm one of those ones. I can do like maybe 2 or 3 fingers at the most on each hand.
Yeah.
I'm not that great. But I love all the sounds in the different plugins. I just got some of the Easy Mix sounds, and there's some great well, they call it Mellotune, but
Yeah.
Mellotron sounds in there, and I've just really been having a lot of fun playing with those.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, keyboards are a lot of fun.
They are because, man, I got to tell you, with keyboards, they kind of take the box away and you're not thinking outside the box anymore. There's no box. So you can just go and have fun and just do whatever. It's the choices they're endless. Whatever you want to do, the creativity is endless, really, with keyboards.
Yeah. And now I wanted to talk about the podcast that you
Mhm.
have. And what's the name of it and what inspired you to start the podcast?
The Mixing Board podcast. Yes, the Mixing Board. Oh my gosh, the Mixing Board has been in works for the longest time. I'm not kidding. I don't know when podcasts I think came out, like in 2003, 2004. I remember like the first
Something
podcast.
like that.
Yeah, they just came out. And I'm not going to say that I thought about this ever since then, but I remember in 2006 when I did move out to LA, I was like, yeah, I do want to do a podcast because I'm a huge fan of talk radio, specifically Howard Stern, okay? I grew up watching Howard Stern on E, and I was listening to him on Sirius Radio, so you kind of hear, the king of all media, and there was just this very natural flow to his conversations with people, and it's like, man, that just looks fun. It looks fun. I never looked at it as I want to be a radio DJ or anything like that. It just looked fun. What he was doing just looked fun. So I remember just always telling myself in the back of my head, I want to do a podcast because I knew podcasts were going to be the next best thing and terrestrial radio is almost on its way out. So I was like, man, I want to do a podcast, but I never really followed up with it. So as the years went by, I listened to more podcasts. I didn't even listen to Sirius Radio anymore. I was just listening to podcasts. One of my favorite podcasts, obviously, the Joe Rogan Experience and Lady Audio. Let's not forget Lady Audio.
Of course. The best.
The
Thank
best
you.
podcast. And when you listen to these podcasts, you're like, man, this just looks fun because just like you and I are having, we're just having a conversation amongst friends. And it's like, the listener's going to learn so much here. And it's like, this just looks so much fun. And to me, I've always told myself, if it's not fun, I'm not going to do it. I just want to have fun. So I remember it was like 2013. I just got married, and Mike and I were set to start production with Displaced Music. And I told myself, I said, you know what? I'm going to hold off on the podcast because I've waited all these years. I'm just going to continue holding off. Let's get Displaced Music up off the ground, running. Let's push it forward. And then let's see what's going to happen. So I remember when Mike and I completely finished Displaced Music, as far as like the initial 10 songs we wanted so we can go live with the website. That was my cue. I said, okay, cool. I'm going to take a couple months. I'm going to start getting the equipment I need, start, interviews, this and that. And I just rolled with it. And I just love it. I love podcasts. It's really the most fun I've ever had aside from making music. I love this. I love just talking, and it's like one mic and the audience, and whoever the guest is going to be. So for me, what I initially thought of is, you hear all these podcasts and there's sponsors and all that. And I said, okay, that's cool. I don't have any sponsors. I don't have any backers. So I was like, I'm going to make a podcast and I'm going to talk to the people that I want to talk to. I'm not going to let anyone dictate, how I should talk or who I should talk to or what products I'm going to plug. I'm going to talk to the people I want to talk to. I'm going to get musicians. I'm going to get artists. I'm not just going to get drummers. I'm not going to just get producers. No, I'm going to get everyone. If you are an artist, if you're a creative thinker, come on the show. Let's talk. Because in this world of music, in this world of art, we're all in it for the same reason, and that is to evoke the emotions of the person listening. And we want to motivate through music and touch someone through our music. So let's do that. And then as far as other guests, it's like, I have companies, the product companies that I endorse personally, or I use, or I want to learn more about. I don't just get random calls, let's say from Zildjian. I'm going to have Zildjian on the podcast tomorrow. I don't get random calls from Zildjian say, hey, Brynner, we want to be on the podcast. And, if you do this for us, we'll do so-and-so. None of that. If I want Zildjian, I will reach out to them and say, hey guys, want to be on the podcast? It's a huge honor for me to have you guys on. I won't just promote products or talk to artists that I don't want to. So really what you get on the podcast is raw. It's 100%. It's unedited, unfiltered. Even though there's like a E for the explicit rating, I don't really cuss. And I'm watching myself not to cuss today, Clara, I promise. I'm not going to cuss. Okay. But, it's funny that even though there's an E, because I told myself, if I slip up, I slip up. But I rarely cuss, so it's family friendly, but you'll have those occasional slip-ups here and there. So that's a little bit about the podcast and why I got started. I love talking. I love meeting people. I love connecting with people.
Yeah, it's kind of the same way I got started, because when podcasts first came out, I thought, ooh, how fun is that? I want a podcast, and I couldn't decide what I wanted to have a topic on. Did I want to talk about ghosts? Did I want to talk about something that's popular? Because I look online and I can see these people with these podcasts, and they just talk about Bigfoot or something like that, and they have thousands of listeners. I'm like, why? And the sound quality is horrible. But anyway, I finally got around to getting myself set up, and I said, okay, I want to do it. I looked up, I was lying in bed, and I looked up, and I thought, Lady Audio.
Nice.
Yeah. And so then I looked online, and I was like, oh my goodness, ladyaudio.com is there. Lady Audio is nowhere. I can take it. I can grab it. So I just grabbed it right then and there. And that was the end of it. I kind of tried to make a business out of it. I'm not endorsed, or like I don't have any sponsors or anything either. Not yet anyway. I mean, I would like to, but at the same time I'm kind of in the same place with you, where like I don't want anyone telling me what I can talk about, or I have to plug something, or
Right.
whatever. But
Right.
I mean, we'll see what the future brings, because I'm not closing any doors in that area either. But
Sure.
but I so in regards to the guests that you have, it's similar to mine too, because I really like talking with the artists. And I remember something that Larry Crane said in one of the interviews I listened to him in, and said, I think the question was, how did tape op get started? And he said, well, I was noticing that there are, the high-end musicians, and then there's no one really talking about where most of the music is being made. And that is by just the regular person with a couple $1,000 that wants to dump to try to make a music studio. That's where most of the music is being made, and it's still true today. That was like back when tape op first started.
Sure.
So it's still true today. Now it's even easier for people and cheaper to get a home recording studio. So you can just, there are so many musicians out there, and mixing artists and mastering artists and recording artists, and there's this whole realm of people out there, and yet still today on a lot of the podcasts we only hear about the famous names. We hear Steve Lillywhite over and over again. We hear Pensado over and over again, which is great, and I learn a ton from, I grew up with Hugh Padgham records and Lillywhite records. That's what I grew up with. So I mean, I get it, but at the same time, the majority of the music out there being made is being made by just the regular people. And on top of that, a lot of them are getting really great sounds, and it just keeps getting better and better. So.
Oh yeah, it's taken a whole world of its own, really, with podcasting. I mean, from the sound, from the audio quality, it's amazing. It really is, and you can create a podcast virtually anywhere that you're at.
Yep. So what kind of a mic do you use?
I am using the Shure SM7B.
Okay. I'm using a 58.
Oh, nice. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this. When I first started, and I remember going to my buddy Sam's house, and we sat there, and I'm like, so I was going to interview my very first guest that I was going to interview. Was legendary jazz drummer Peter Erskine.
Ooh.
And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, I need to get my ducks in a row, because I don't want to show up at this guy's house looking just like I'm all over the place. And I was like, look, here's the mics that I've thought about getting. One was the SM58, the SM7B. There was also a Rhodes mic that I forgot what it was. I forgot the which series it was, but it was a Rhodes or the two Shures, the SM7B or the 58. So I go and I'm kind of putting in all these mics, and Sam had the Rhodes, and we recorded, and I swear to you, there was zero difference between the 7B and the 58.
Wow.
Zero. I'm telling you right now, there was zero. And the only reason I bought the 7B was I already had one that I would use for vocals, certain vocals in my studio. And I just said, you know what? I'm just going to buy another one, because if not, I have to go out there and buy two SM58s and get this and that. Let me just get another SM7B. It's just going to match up to the one I have, and I'm good to go. So I I would have gotten the 58s as well. They're amazing, amazing mics, and they work beautifully, really, for podcasting.
They do. And if you listen to, well, for the audience probably who have been following along, you'll notice some of my earlier podcasts have different sounds and for my voice, and that's because I was testing out different microphones for each podcast. And I sat down with about 4 microphones and I tested them out, and then I chose which one I wanted, and I thought I wanted the Rode NT1A, so I used that, but my voice changed when I was actually in the interview, so it ended up not working out. And I guess my radio voice, or whatever you want to say, is different when I'm having the conversation with the actual person. Right. And each guest is different also. So I know that my voice changes from guest to guest, and it's just how I relate to people. And I feel like the 58, it was a toss up between the 57 and the 58, but I feel like the 58 works better for my voice because I'm a female. I have the female voice.
Sure.
And I think that's why the 57 didn't work out for the podcast. But it was a toss up, and the Spirit microphone didn't work out. I had a Sennheiser I was using for a couple of shows. That one didn't work out. And then I finally settled on the 58. I was like, this one seems to get it for pretty much all of the podcasts. I'm just going to stick with it.
That's awesome. I've heard your podcast and they're great. I mean, the 58 works great. Now, let me ask you something. How do you hook up your mic, and what are you using? Because when I record my podcasts, I was just going to go straight into my Pro Tools, but I actually started using a Zoom H6, and with the 7B, you have to have a pretty good amplifier. You have to amp it because it's very low. So I actually use a product called the Fethead. I don't know. Have you ever heard of the Fethead?
No. What is the Fethead?
Fethead gives you an extra 20 dB of volume on your mic. And yeah, you'll plug it right into your mic, and then the XLR will plug right into the Fethead. And I got to tell you, like my Zoom, I forgot it once for an interview that I was doing with Brian Geller of Ultimate Ears. I had to have the volume on 7. Now, you can always, in post-production, raise it up a little bit. But instead of going all the way to 7, I'm now at a 4. And I don't have to push the mic all that much, and it gives me an extra 20 dB of volume, and it's great. I mean, it's only like $99. It's really good. I'll send you some information about it. I'll take a picture and I'll send it to you after the show.
That would be really cool, because I have one of the mics I tried. I actually have a really old Electro Voice.
Oh,
I don't know if you...
Yeah, you know what? I have an Electro Voice in my closet.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, your dad probably used it.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, it's like a really great broadcasting mic, but it doesn't have enough juice. Like, it needs the preamp. So
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely interested because I'd like to use that mic.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll send you a picture. It's fantastic. I was a little hesitant about it because I was like, I don't know if this is just one of those gimmicks, but I saw some reviews and they were good. So I was like, I'm just going to buy one. I bought one. I loved it. I bought a second one. And anytime I do a podcast, I'm always just plugging both mics in, put the preamp on there, and I'm good to go. And it's virtually just kind of extends the XLR just by a few inches. I mean, it's not even bigger, bulkier, anything. So yeah, you'll like it.
That's cool. And if you do ever need to repair the Electro Voice, which we had to do, my husband and I, he helped me with it. But the XLR, there weren't any standards when it was built. So the posts are not what you would normally think they would be in another microphone. They are different. So your hot and your, whatever on the schematic, if you actually look up the original Electro Voice schematic, those posts are different than, say, any of the newer mics, like the newer 58s or whatever. So be careful if you ever have to repair the Electro Voice.
Nice. Thanks for giving me that tidbit, because that's really important. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I had another question, and now I can't remember what it was. Oh, yeah. Oh, you were asking me how I record, so I wanted to let you know. I record straight into Logic, and then I actually have a Skype phone number. So I paid I think it's like $25 or something for the year for the Skype phone number. And so I can call people on their phones or on their Skype. It doesn't matter either way. And like I called you today, I'm using Skype, and I got the little Skype recorder, so I can record your side of the conversation, and then my side of the conversation goes into Logic.
Oh, very cool. Okay, very nice.
Yeah.
That's
and
also
I'm just going straight into a really old Motu Traveler that we got back in 2006, I think it was.
Nice.
So it's a really old one, and too bad Black Lion Audio doesn't do any mods on it anymore, but but it is what it is.
That's right.
So anyway, let's see. The other question I have. Oh, so when does your podcast air?
I was doing it airs Tuesdays. So if they're listening, I don't know, depending on when they're going to hear this podcast, but it comes out every other Tuesday. I was doing it every Tuesday. So I forgot when the very first episode came on. I think it was like early September, and I'm already going to be pushing episode number 6 tomorrow, which is November 1st. But I do it every other Tuesday. I started doing every other Tuesday after my 3rd episode, because it's weird. When I was doing it every week, one, people don't realize how much time it takes to do podcasts. I mean,
right.
From the time, you interview, and then there's post, and, as, it's your show, you want to make it sound good. So you want to go through and check the EQs, and you may edit something here and there, but it takes a long time. And I just felt that when I was doing it every week, there was no room for me to find an artist, talk to them, learn about them, mesh with them, edit the podcast, because by the time I knew it, it's already Tuesday, and I have to come up with a new episode. And it's like, oh man. Plus, on top of that, I found that a lot of my audience, because it's still new, so a lot of the audience was emailing me saying, "Oh, hey, still listening to the first episode." I'm like, "Huh, I'm already like in episode 3, so you're behind by 2." And it's like, okay, people are not listening to it the day it comes out. I mean, there's I want to give them that 2-week window of where I can even just advertise for it. I can go on Twitter or Instagram and say, hey guys, if you haven't listened to, let's say, episode number 4, it's out. It's been out for about a week now. Go check it out. And I'll do that for about 2 weeks. That way I'll either get a new audience who's just viewing that post, or it'll give my current audience enough time to kind of go through and give themselves time to listen to the full podcast and then go on to the next. I just felt when I was doing it every week, man, it wasn't working for me, and I think my audience really was kind of getting bombarded with it. So there's a lot of people out there who put out podcasts like 2 or 3 times a week, and I applaud them, because it really can be a full-time gig.
Yeah, they must be doing those live shows.
Yeah, I think so. Where there's like no editing involved in it. Oh my God, it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, it is. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. I remember one of my blunders with the podcast. It was my podcast. So if you go to the mixing board, if you search for it, you're going to find like episode 0, and then it goes to episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So episode 0 was just me. It was me and this mic. No intro music, no intros or endings, nothing. It was just me and the mic and saying, hey guys, it's me, Brynner Agassi. Thanks for downloading. Here's my life story. And I really just basically took the audience from when I was born all the way to right now, which I'm 36 years old. And it's like, here you go. This is who I am. This is what I've done. I hope you listen to the other podcasts. And the very next day, episode number 1 came out, which, because it was just, the mixing board, it's fitting that Mike was my very first guest on the show, and we just had fun. And the blunder of it all was, God, Mike was going to get married that week. So we recorded like on it was a Saturday, and he was going to get married the Saturday, the next Saturday, the following Saturday. So he was nice enough to have his cell phone on silent and face down, so he's not getting any calls. And he was getting calls left and right because, they have vendors, they have, the wedding decorator and all this stuff that people are trying to get in touch with him. And so if you listen to the interview, you're going to hear a buzzing sound, and that buzzing sound is the cell reception from his cell phone, kind of, interjecting into the Zoom H6 recorder. And the whole time, all you hear is like zzz, zzz, like this. So I remember when I went back and listened to it, I was like, oh no, Mike's already in his honeymoon. I can't get him back for to redo the thing. So yeah, I had to even the Isotope RX plugin, which is, it actually has a preset called cell phone digital distortion or cell phone feed, cell phone buzzing, something like that. But that didn't even help it. So nothing helped my case. And I just remember on the podcast, I was like, ladies and gentlemen, it is my first podcast. I'm still learning. I'm so sorry. It will never happen again. So, but you live and learn. And now it's like anytime I do a podcast, my phone is like on silent and like 10 feet away from me. So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was wondering about that Isotope because I was thinking about getting it. It's kind of pricey. But I'm still thinking about getting it once I get a little more momentum going with Lady Audio. But
absolutely.
Yeah, that would help, at least help a little bit with some of those. It's like weird little frequency things that pop up when people are on cell phones that are not a very good area for reception. So
yeah, I haven't found anything that works. I mean, they claim that plugin works. I'll be honest with you. I love like Isotope trash, but I'm sorry if Isotope's listening to this right now. Sorry. That plugin does not work, and it did not help my case, and I can almost guarantee you it's not going to help Lady Audio, so please find us a remedy.
We need it to RX what it says it's going to RX.
Exactly.
Well, we're up on an hour right now, so
okay.
I just wanted to, say thank you so much for coming on the show, and I can't wait to listen to the rest of your podcasts because the only one I've listened to so far is episode 0. So, I'm really looking forward to listening to the rest of the shows, and thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you. It was my pleasure, and I'm definitely going to be having you on the show as well, so we'll have to make some time for that.
Yeah, for sure. I look forward to it.
Thanks so much.